You're listening to the Tech Addicts Podcast. This week, we have Mr. Jason Bradbury from the Gadget Show and many other ventures, sharing his thoughts on AI, DeLorean, Sega Game Gears, Walkman, and many other topics. Hello and welcome to the Tech Addicts Podcast. I would be your host, Mr. Gareth Miles, and this is my co-host, Mr. Ted Salmon.
Hello everyone. Greetings from North Wales once again.
Oh yes, and in Northern Ireland as well, where it's a beautiful day. It's very sunny, and you can hear the birds squawking out the window, probably a bit louder than normal. What's things like your way, Ted?
It looks like it's summer over here. Last night I was actually quite cool for the first time and put a cardi on.
Oh, quite superb at this time of year as well. Well, for those of you who are just joining us, we actually have a very special guest, and he's a proper professional television host. He's a writer. He's a tech guru, a bit of tech royalty, I suppose, as well. He hosted the Gadget Show from 2004 to 2016, and now he's back with the Gadget Show podcast with Miss Suzi Perry. That is Mr. Jason Bradbury. How are you, Jason?
Oh, fantastic. I feel very privileged to have such a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. Tech royalty. Good grief. What about that? I'm going to use that. I'm going to grab that couplet and insert it into Wikipedia.
Well, it's worth putting, because your route through tech has taken you into the Guinness World Record holding book thing that they call it. 7?
Yeah, I did 7 world records during my time on the Gadget Show. I do feel a bit embarrassed because I didn't have to do a great deal. And I'm aware that there are people on there that have done incredible things like land speed records and stuff. Although I did a version of a land speed record, actually, now it comes to it. We put 2 jet engines on a skateboard. And I got the world record for street luge, which was 118 miles an hour. So that is actually quite impressive. But most of the others involve me, jumping in like a remote control car and things like that, which was a lot of fun. But I don't want people to think that I'm some kind of, super being, because clearly not.
Yes, absolutely. Standing on a skateboard at that speed would be a little bit scary, I suppose. But you're not obviously going to be able to do any of these Guinness World Record attempts on the new Gadget Show podcast that you're hosting with Miss Suzi Perry.
Oh, yeah. No, it's great. We're back. So I haven't done anything with the Gadget Show since I left about 7 years ago, actually. And I left television altogether. I just decided to take my life in a different direction, spend time with the kids. I did a trip around the world with my 3 kids. We took them out of school. That was amazing. And we homeschooled them and, went to Australia and them in Japan and all over the place. And so it was really lovely when I got a phone call, Christmas just gone, from the original producer of the Gadget Show saying, how's about this? And I kind of signed up. We did a few experimental episodes and people seemed to like it. But I wouldn't say that we're not beyond doing a world record on the podcast. I actually think that's quite a good idea. Like what I mean, can you think of any examples, Ted or Gareth, of things that we, because you're podcast extraordinaire.
I got one.
You're the experts. What sort of thing could we do within the confines of a podcast studio?
I got one you could do is to stop talking about other people putting adverts in things and then having adverts in your own podcast. One episode I listened to, either the last one or one before, you were slagging off everyone for having adverts all over the place, and then in your own podcast, I'm only joking. I know that that's how it's set up and that's how you've got to do it. But it was ironic that you'd had that topic and then suddenly there's adverts.
I'm just two-faced, Ted, and you've just exposed me. I don't even remember that, but it sounds pretty par for the course.
Yeah.
It's funny because what's interesting to me, actually, and I quite like it, is the kind of parochial nature of this new sort of digital broadcasting ecosystem, where we're kind of back to the days of like the news in the 1950s, where,
right.
you know what I mean? Where on-air broadcasters would say, this news episode is brought to you care of Mom's Soap. And it's so like that, isn't it, in this new media age?
Yeah.
And it actually feels a bit more honest. I mean, what we were saying, actually, I don't know specifically what you're referring to, but what we've been saying in multiple episodes is we're here, we've got a loyal audience, we're doing some cool stuff, but we need a sponsor. And actually, I believe we've got a sponsor. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, so I'm probably in territory I shouldn't be in at the moment. But we've actually found a sponsor, which is why we're able to come back for what will be our second season. But without a sponsor, it doesn't matter who you are. You know, you might have been on the telly 7 years ago, but it makes no difference. You know, these things cost money, don't they? And the media landscape is now full of amazing content in a way that I think, it certainly wasn't when I started in television. I certainly didn't predict it either.
I do think it's quite funny that in the years to come, our kids are going to be looking back at YouTube content and having to sit through ads for Express or NordVPN without any idea of what that actually was. It only existed way back in the early 2000s, but in 2047, it's still on YouTube being advertised.
Oh my God. And I mean, that is the thing, isn't it? If you cast yourself into the future, you're absolutely right, of course. It's very likely that YouTube will be a kind of vintage oddity, because who would have thought that the BBC would now, in all seriousness, the debate around, you know, the license fee is becoming very, very hot, and I think it's, you know, it's fascinating to me that, I mean, if we cast, I don't know how old you guys are because your voices hide your age. I can tell you I'm 55, and I remember, I think there were only 3 TV channels when I first was sort of conscious of television, and certainly they ended by midnight, if not before, and they played the national anthem because I remember watching it before I went to bed. And
wow.
So, I mean, my God, you're so right. YouTube, it can't survive in its current form. It has to evolve because the market will demand that, won't it? Certainly by 2047, I think you said.
There is a way around the advertising thing, though. I think is that if incidentally I'm 60, Jason, and I too had 3 TV channels on our black and white telly.
Amazing.
There is a way around it. I think is that YouTube Google should allow people the adverts to be plugins, so they put them in, not the content creator, and they do a better deal with people to allow that. So in 2047, they can then just plug in current adverts. I don't see why that doesn't happen. I think everyone's being greedy.
Well, if we're talking about 20 years hence, now, so one of the things that I do, right? People might not realize this, but actually the way I pay the mortgage is giving talks, generally about AI, but more often about transformative technology. And I have a concept, a bit like a kind of stand-up comedian has a set. Yeah, so sometimes if you see the same stand-up comic a couple of times in the course of a year or two, you'll realize that their set is effectively the same. But you kind of polish it up for different audiences, in my case, for different clients. So I'll adjust the content quite a bit, but effectively it's the same concept. And the concept is something I call the 1,000-year decade, which is that because of the exponential, you know, explosive nature of growth, we're going to see 1,000 years of innovation in the next 10 years. And AI is certainly one of the reasons for that, because it's so explosive and so game changing. So actually, I think, Ted, that the YouTube or equivalent in 2047 will be hovering sort of augmented reality, you know, as we walk down the street or as we sit in our self-driving robot cars with headsets on, like glasses a bit like mine, but actually it'll be more, and I hate to use the phrase, but more of a metaverse than it will be a kind of, if you like, a kind of shadow of analog television, which is what YouTube is at the moment.
Yeah. We're not going to be sitting in front of our tellies like we do now. You're quite right.
Bit of a scary realization, isn't it? Whenever that could actually be, it's a bit like Back to the Future 2, isn't it? I think they use something like that. They're sitting with their VR headsets on, just enjoying life and looking around, and he's in the kitchen cooking, and it's telling him what to do. But Ted and I have discussed over the number of or a number of weeks about the implementation of AI, and especially Microsoft's big announcement recently to put in well, the Copilot is obviously arriving on most desktops around the world with Copilot buttons and dedicated chips and badly baked in feature sets that just seem to be put together on the back of a cigarette packet and launched out to the world to find all kinds of exploits. There's no beta testing or anything like that. It's just here's AI, you're having it, even though it does feel like it's somewhat half baked.
I agree. In fact, the software that we're using to record this podcast, I've just noticed down the bottom, there's a button that says AI Companion, and for
I'm
the
scared to press it.
But this is the truth. I was about to say, based on what you just said, I am a bit reticent to click it in case the podcast descends into kind of robot-induced chaos, or rather, just if the recording doesn't work, or I mean, the sort of things that it does, I think, is it enables you it will, for example, listen to us and then it will take notes based on our natural language. So it's quite useful. But I know what you mean. There is a great sense at the moment. I don't know what you guys think, that we're not being consulted, and we're not being consulted around a technology that is explosive in the kind of non-literal sense. So what I mean by that is, because of the exponential nature of anything connected to information technology, there is a doubling, isn't there? There is a kind of 18-month cycle of doubling that's happening, and has been happening since Moore predicted it in, I think it was 1965. And it's we're kind of past the near the curve now, so that's why things feel so quick. And that's okay if it's a handheld gaming machine. So let's say that 2 years later, the Steam Deck is twice the resolution, and the hard drive is twice as big, and things like that. But when you're talking about a super intelligence or an intelligence that's sort of borderline super, becoming super, that exponential explosive nature of its innovation is problematic, isn't it? I mean, that's what you're saying. Like, they're implementing it like it's just another add-on, but it's not. This is potential. This is a technology that, depending on who you talk to, is already capable of developing itself, and that's really scary and very sci-fi.
It is, yeah. And there's an awful lot of movies that are coming out at the moment, the likes of The Creator and things like that, that are very much AI focused, where AI is essentially the villain. And we have to come to grips with it. And I know where we do another podcast called The Projector Room, and our pal on there, Alan, he's very stoked in conspiracies and things like that, about how things will make their way into the media before they actually happen, in a way of subtly preparing you for the inevitable future. And AI appearing in films as a kind of malevolent force is a bit of a scary idea. Do you think that's going to happen in the future?
Well, I don't know if you are setting me up for a
bit of both.
A reference to my forthcoming Kickstarter project, which is, as I think you know, about an errant AI, the rollout of an AI that goes rogue instantly. It's a comedy set in Skegness, like all good feature film comedies are, called Ctrl A.I. Delete. And I've written it with a stand-up comedian friend of mine. And you're right, we're trying to catch the wave of content, entertainment content, and the sort of philosophical editorial content that is trying to understand this moment in time where things could get really, really scary. I don't want to just force it on you, though. So if you want me to tell you about the movie, I'll tell you all about it. But
absolutely do. I'm intrigued. Yeah. Do tell.
Oh, okay. So on the 30th of August, a Kickstarter is live, and we're looking to get the budget for this movie that we've written. It's the second movie that my comedy buddy and I have written. The first one was about golf, strangely enough, because I was brought up as a caddy in Woodall Spa, Lincolnshire, and it's about a couple of guys trying to train a bird to catch a ball and drop it in the hole and win a Bentley. It's called Pigeonholed, but that never got anywhere. We hiked it around Soho and to the production companies, and of course, talking about the march of technology. Of course, you don't have to do that now. You can come up with an idea as we have. You can self-fund it using crowdfunding, and you can use cameras like the Sony A7S III, which is a variation of the FX3, which was used to film The Creator that you just mentioned.
Yes.
So that's incredible. So we're talking about a £3,500 camera that was used by, I forget the name of the director of The Creator, but used by their director of photography and the director to create that incredible movie. I mean, to be fair, they probably put £200,000 cinema lenses on the front of that camera. Yeah. But interestingly, we filmed some sizzle footage for our movie in order to put a promo together, which you can see on the Kickstarter, or if you don't mind me saying, Ctrl A.I delete.net. You can find us there.
Okay.
That's CTRL, like the keyboard. It's a play on Control Alt Delete, obviously. Go along to Ctrl A.I delete.net and you can see all of this. But it's not just the crowdfunding nature of this new age of media, the way that you can get straight to your potential customers for your startup idea, whatever it is, but also the technology like the camera I just mentioned, like the fact that we've all got, amazing editing packages now on our laptops, and laptops that are capable of, ingesting 4K or 8K and editing it. And the fact that the three of us are chatting now, with levels of audio quality that would have been unimaginable 10 years ago in a home setup. All of this is what I mean when I talk about the explosive nature of, technological innovation.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. It's one of those things that I think is rolling out, and people maybe find it difficult to find a practical use for AI. You can sit down with a calculator and be able to type boobies in and things like that, but whenever you sit down with an AI, you're kind of wondering, how is this going to fit into my life? You might have some features in your camera, and if you've got a Samsung or an Apple iPhone or something like that, you can use AI to beef up the picture and make it look prettier. More times than not, just go back to the original and use that instead. But do you have any sort of killer practical uses of AI for everyday people? Just that person there, I'm pointing at them, who's listening to this podcast right now. What would blow their minds, do you think?
I don't know about blowing minds. I mean, blowing minds is, I would imagine, if I was a biologist and I'm looking at large amounts of data and I'm trying to, do something with genetics. So for example, certain jobs that are at risk now and in the next 10 years from the growth of AI are often jobs where you pass, as in PARSE, I think you spell it, large amounts of material. I probably just misspelled it. So for example, a legal researcher would be a really good example. So your job would be to find, prescient examples of legal cases historically that you can use to bring, a case for a modern issue, right? So you've got to look through large amounts of literature and books, old cases, and spot it. Well, obviously, a bit like Where's Wally, right? You've got to find Wally on a page. And so we're quite good at doing that. But then you grab computer vision, which is one of the key components of AI. It's what makes Teslas, safe to drive themselves, for example. AI algorithms, machine learning is really good with the right, hooked up to the right camera at finding stuff that we can't see. It's why it's really good in imaging. Here's a good example, actually. Imaging for tumors. AI is making huge jumps in medical imaging. But back to the example of a legal researcher and that sort of weird analogy of Where's Wally. You could make a Where's Wally that was like, a mile long, still to scale. So the same scale as the Where's Wally book. And if you had the right kind of drone with the right kind of wide angle lens, it would take minutes. It would take just one swoop of the mile long, Where's Wally book for the AI to spot Wally, because computer vision is so much better at looking at finite details and looking in areas of the spectrum that we can't even see in, like infrared, for example, or thermal imaging. And so in those sorts of, is that sort of getting towards the?
It is, yeah. It's where you could welcome in AI? Ted, for example, would you be more open to AI, thinking that it's going to revolutionize things towards, being able to pick your nose better than you can pick it yourself?
What I was going to ask Jason about was creativity, and I mean, I have a go at writing film reviews, very brief ones, and so do you, Gareth. And there is a fear that the reviewing thing is going to go out the window. I've tried to use Gemini and Copilot and stuff to ask for a film review, but it at the moment it just doesn't feel human enough. It doesn't. You can ask it all sorts of clever questions about, focus on this aspect or blah blah blah, and it kind of makes a good stab at it. But I think personally, I think that in creative circles, in that respect, writing, I think that there's going to be a gap for a while between conning people that this is not a robot. Do you think, Jason?
Yes, I think that. Okay, so in the 1970s, I remember there was a big push for kind of domestic technology. So technology that took the drudgery out of domestic tasks like cleaning or cooking and things like that. That's why we had, teas maids that would wake you up in the morning and a cup of tea. Yeah, you remember all that stuff. And there was a real push. It was all the rage. And one of the things that was all the rage were machines that made coffee for you. And everyone was predicting the end of the coffee shop in its, as it was then. And of course, that didn't happen. What actually happened was we went down the route like we did a bit with electric cars. And then there was a rollback as we started to realize the limitations of that technology and the human in the chain, the value of the, bearded barista with tattoos that takes 10 minutes to make your, cappuccino, as opposed to a machine doing it in 30 seconds. That value, the human in the chain, suddenly becomes more obvious to us. And there's been a rollback to artisan businesses, handmade, bespoke things already in reaction to the explosion of, say, Amazon or let's say less human retail experiences. I think the high streets, for example, which currently is in crisis because the warehouses with tills at the front, which are effectively what we used to call department stores, are all having to give way to the fact that you can now, apparently in London, you can order on Amazon and some products come the same day, not even the next day, which is bonkers. I'm sure that's maybe the case in Manchester and Birmingham as well. I don't know. I live in Cornwall. So the fact that I can order something and it comes the next day in Cornwall is insane. And that's had a massive effect on the high street, a detrimental effect. But what I'm seeing as I go around, I go to these various events and I judge competitions for various businesses and things like that, is a move towards experiential shopping. So what humans do really well is what we're doing now. We're just shooting the breeze, we're having a chat. And in a retail environment, that's golden, isn't it? Because if you can have a conversation and a chat with a customer, it's much more likely that they're going to buy something from you. It's that sort of wonderful paradox that good salespeople understand. And so if you add to that, because obviously these things don't happen in isolation, if you add to that, and this is another huge subject, the soon to arrive floodgate opening of self-driving vehicles. So when vehicles start driving themselves, then the idea that you need a big car park in the middle of a city centre is kind of pointless, right? And the idea that you need big busy roads in the city centre is also pointless. So what's going to happen is our cars will drop us off. They'll drive off to some abandoned airfield where they'll sit and chat a bit like Mater and Lightning McQueen. And we'll be left in much greener, cleaner, less polluted, more experiential retail environments. That's where I think we're going. And it's not just something I've imagined. It's something that I've come across when I've done events with architects and town planners. I also visited a place called Masdar City in Abu Dhabi, which is an experimental city, the world's first fully carbon neutral city. Although they say it's a city, it's more like a village, really, like a university campus. But they desalinate their own water. They produce their own electricity using solar. They have amazing outdoor, indoor spaces that are kind of made out of things like terracotta. The buildings are clad in terracotta because it's really thermally efficient. There is street level air conditioning, which is just passive. They have these big, almost, well, they're not almost, they actually are medieval towers. It's the concept is a medieval idea where you have a big tower and fins at the top, and the air comes across, hits the fin, goes down, cools, comes out at street level. They also, but they add a little bit of technology to that. They've clad the inside of the tunnels with Teflon, so there's less friction, so the air is even cooler, and they add particles of water to it. So I'm just saying, when these technologies combine, in this case, some interesting out-of-the-box thinking about civic design, the design of buildings and retail spaces, plus electric or hydrogen self-driving vehicles that don't have to stay around. So you've got, you can have grass, and you can have more more organic materials in your civic space, and then you have a kind of human element in it where people that are attempting to sell you something recognize that they need to maybe deploy a little bit of theatre to make your retail experience different from the very convenient app, which is where we are at the moment. Does that make sense? The sort of coming together of different pieces, making a new reality?
So what you're in relation to my original question about creativity and writing, as an example, but it could be in filmmaking or whatever. You think that human element will prevail, and we won't be just swept away with not knowing if something's a robot or not. Now, when I look through, for example, a TikTok stream, you're beginning to have to look quite carefully to see if something is an animation or if it's not. At the moment, I feel as though I can still tell, and I can still tell, as I said earlier, if a robot's written a film review or a mobile phone review or whatever. But I think you're saying that you're agreeing with me. There's still some time to go with that.
I am, and forgive me if I kind of went off on a tangent there. Your question was rather clear, but I was attempting, in an abstract sense, to say that there will be a return to the human, and
yes.
And there will be a commercial value in things that are organic and human. And with regard specifically to what you're saying, you're making me think of the Voight Camp test from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what Philip K. Dick was talking about, and it's why the idea connected with all of us who've watched that film, I'm guessing, and most people that have read the book, because that kind of postmodern disconnect from reality was certainly already happening in the 80s. Now it's real. It's not even fiction about that. It's real life. And the idea of deep fakes, the idea of being hacked by a non-human that comes across as as someone from the bank that's ringing up. These are all going to be the issues of our time. And I am not saying it will be straightforward. I think it will be tricky. I think it's already tricky. I think we're seeing things, like you say, in social media that are possibly not born entirely of AI, but are enhanced by computer algorithms to target us with messages, for example, for political campaigns or maybe some form of phishing attack.
Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of fascinating. It's a wee bit scary, but I think you're right. The human will prevail out of the whole thing. And
You think?
Well, hopefully, yeah. I have seen Terminator, but you never know. So, where would you say that that is the most subtle use of AI in our world at the moment, that we don't maybe realize that we're seeing AI?
Without question, GPT-4, which, as far as I'm aware, I mean, Grok is popular, and you mentioned Gemini, which, I mean, OpenAI's natural language engine, I think, is being used everywhere, and people aren't acknowledging it. And so, for example, in education, you'd be mad not to use GPT-4 as a university student, because it just cuts down on time, and it is so useful. I don't know if you guys remember when in the newspapers, they were in the 70s and early, well, it would have been the late 70s, they were talking about calculators and how abhorrent it was that young students were never going to have to think again because calculators were going to render them dumb maths drones. So I think it feels to me, and I've done a bit around education. I was a university lecturer in product design, albeit a part-time lecturer at the University of Lincoln. And I've been involved because of my stuff on the telly. You know, you get rolled into kind of like the Big Bang science competition where I judge students' work and things like that. And I was also a school governor for several years at an amazing school, actually, in London, a technology school. And so with my kind of educator's hat on, that's in inverted commas, by the way, I would say that we probably need to set parameters, set rules, but be accepting of things like ChatGPT in education because it's just inevitable. I don't see that there's any way you can hide the use of it because all you've got to do is grab it, edit it a bit, whack it into Notepad. And, you know, all of these so-called kind of filters that education institutions say they're using to, to indicate that someone has used an AI in their, let's say their university essay. I don't think it would take much to outwit them. I think that's all a bit of smoke and mirrors, personally.
Yeah. See, I actually used to work with a fella, and I remember having a conversation about it. He had the alphabet printed out and stuck to the front of his computer because he didn't know it in order, and that actually it scared me a little to start with. But then I started thinking about it in that term of how calculators and spell checks and grammatical checks and things like that all became, routines. We would gladly have them in our lives. And he just went from the point of view that why do I need to learn the alphabet? I could just print it out and stick it in front of me.
Well, I suspect if you asked a philosopher, to define memory, they might include your mobile phone in their definition. In that way that philosophers have a way of talking about reality in a very different context, and they can be very abstract or very accepting of lots of different versions of reality. And so here's the thing: if I was to meet you guys and we had a chat, and then I wanted to, I don't know, get back in touch, I might just take a photograph of where we met, or take a photograph of your phone number or your business card. Whereas previously, I would have had to have remembered your name or your phone number, for example. Now I don't have to, because arguably there is a new part of my memory. There is a kind of virtual add-on, and it's my mobile phone. And so is AI that different to that? Isn't AI just a deeper, more flexible extension of my current ability to perceive the world, interact with it and remember things?
Right. Well, I'm going to turn the conversation all of a sudden because I'm looking at the time and thinking, wow, we don't have long left with Mr. Jason Bradbury. So I just wanted to throw this out. You've got a DeLorean, don't you?
I do. You did mention Back to the Future too, and I did think, that's an interesting reference. Yeah. So kind of middle-age crisis purchase. It's either, isn't it, like a Porsche or a DeLorean? There you go. And so I bought a DeLorean, a really good condition DeLorean from a guy in Northern Ireland, which is quite interesting. Which, as I'm sure you know, is where they were originally manufactured.
Just up the road.
Yeah. Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Dunmurry. It's near Belfast.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So this is one of the ones that wasn't sent across the channel, and the Atlantic. And then I was working. See, I said I used to be in educational, did educational bits and pieces. I was a mentor for the apprentices at an amazing factory called KMF in Stoke-on-Trent. Really big factory, one of the I think it's probably the biggest metalwork factory in the UK. I don't know for sure. And I used to do events with the apprentices there. They've got like a really big, almost like a college on the campus of the factory for apprentices. That's how dedicated they are. Anyway, I took the car there, and over the course of several months, me and the apprentices and a few other cool people converted this vanilla DeLorean into the the time machine variation from Back to the Future 2. Well, Back to the Future and Back to the Future 2, yeah.
All right, complete with the combustion-y type thing on the back, the poppy up garbage disposal.
The
jolly.
Mr. Fusion. Yeah, the fusion. So here you go. Look, here's a kind of reference point. So in popular culture in 1985, you know, the prop department in Universal put together what they felt would be their best guess at how a fusion reactor powered car would look and work. And it's not just a bunch of bits from an old Cessna and, you know, down the local dump thrown on the back of the car. It's bits from a Cessna and the local dump that combined would, you know, manage the heat, deal with the fusion reactor elements. The flux bands are roughly based on physics. It's all, it kind of works, you know. And what's amazing is that now in 2024, not just anywhere, but in my home county of Lincolnshire, which, by the way, is where my film Ctrl A.I Delete is set. It's set in Skegness. Grimsby, I think, is going to be the site for a working fusion reactor.
Wow. Okay.
In reality, I mean, that's bananas.
It is, yeah. You'll be able to put them in it as well. Bananas, that is.
You could, along with, what was he put? It's some drinks can. I can't
beer,
remember.
I think it is. He pours the beer and then the can too.
And the can, yeah.
But so do you take the DeLorean with all of its additional bits and pieces that you've added to Tesco, or do you just leave it at home?
I have been to a supermarket in it. So I live in Cornwall, and the DeLorean would probably dissolve in the Cornish air, in the salty air. Everything gets rusty in Cornwall. So I keep it in a locker.
But it's aluminium, isn't it?
It is. It's stainless steel, actually.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
No, yeah. And but there's so many different components that it really would rust. Not the main car, but all the elements of it. It's in a lockup in London, and I own it with a good friend of mine. And sometimes we hire it out for events and things like that, or most of the time we just go for a drive. And it's like hanging out with a celebrity, going out in that car.
Yeah.
Not that I've hung out with many celebrities, but it's that idea that people get very excited and they kind of stare and they want to do a picture. And I love it. It's a really lovely, you know, going out in the DeLorean is like having a bit of a special day out and meeting lots of enthusiastic people.
You know, when I was growing up, there was always an urban fairy tale that John DeLorean had locked up a load of, because he did make gold ones.
Yeah.
He locked up a load of them in a factory somewhere in Belfast. And, you know, the workers at the DeLorean plant knew of this, and it spread amongst the local community, but it's never been found. It's always fascinated me. I Google it now and no one talks about it, but it's just one of those little urban fairy tales that kind of disappeared over the years. So you never know. They might still be up there somewhere.
I love it. And I actually follow his daughter on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember her account name, but you should look her up because it's really sweet. Like, she just, you know, clearly like loved her dad and had a great relationship, and she shares her memories with pictures from the 80s and things like that. It's quite nice, actually.
I'll have to do that.
Because he gets a bad press, old DeLorean, doesn't he? But from certainly his daughter thought he was absolutely fab, and the car is amazing. I love it. It's a fascinating story. I mean, what a brilliant sort of aesthetic decision from the production team on that movie, though, don't you think, to choose that car when I'm sure they could have got better commercial deals from less romantic cars for the movie.
Absolutely. They could have made it out of an Austin Allegra. That would have been hilarious. Ted, you used to have one of those, didn't you?
I did, with a square steering wheel. And
how futuristic.
Even more rare was that it was an automatic gearbox as well. I should have held on to it. I bought it for £150.
No way.
Yeah, but it was a clapped out old heap by the time I got it. But
Jason, you're into your retro gadgetry. What kind of things do you have knocking around? You know, you've talked about Commodore 64s in your movie. So I take it that's a computer that's close to your heart.
Yeah, more. I'm very much so. I've got a Spectrum, a working Spectrum, ZX Spectrum Sinclair. I've got a Sinclair C5, which you might like. Talking about cars, Ted, the old Sinclair C5. Have you ever driven one of those?
No, I haven't.
I can see you in that with your sort of retro sensibilities, and In fact, the Sinclair C5, so just for your listeners, three-wheeled recumbent bicycle with a kind of Blake 7 plastic shell around it, looked so futuristic. Now, with the way that metropolitan areas have protected cycle lanes and so on, and it's got a boot as well. I think if you kickstarted a new version of the Sinclair C5, I reckon people would back it. With a much more efficient electric engine. Yeah, it's not great on a roundabout though because of the tricycle configuration. I've got a beautiful mint Atari 2600. I've got a Vectrex. Have you ever seen one of those?
Oh, yeah,
oscilloscope based gaming machine. I've got the every console you can think of. Mega Drive, I've got the Mega CD with the FMV games that you play on it. All the gun games like Point Blank and Time Crisis on first generation PlayStation. Game Gear. I've got a beautiful Game Gear that I keep in a pouch, which lasts about 5 seconds with the batteries. Every Nintendo Game Boy variant you can think of. I've got CRT screens. I've got a collection. I've got 3 different sized Sony PVMs, personal video monitors. Do you remember those?
Yeah. Don't you use one, or is it one of the ones you use at the start of your Way of the Exploding Show YouTube channel? Yeah,
correct. So I've got this live show on a Sunday, Way of the Exploding Show. As you say, it's on YouTube and Spotify and not Spotify, sorry, Twitch and X. I stream on X, which is bonkers. Wow. And so the opening title sequence, you're right, has a Sony PVM, but they're beautiful. Cathode ray tube in miniature format. I mean, I've literally got one that's got a 6-inch screen on it, and it's just fab. And you hook a Nintendo 64 up to that and play GoldenEye or something. It's
the evening gone. Yeah,
that's the evening gone. Well, setting it up is the evening gone. But so I love all the old stuff, and of course, and then I've got lots of paraphernalia around Back to the Future, which I'm kind of obsessed with. So I've got the jacket he wears with the arms that are automatic arms that lengthen and things like that. I've got that, and I've got a kind of rip-off pair of the Nike mags that light up, and so I do love the 80s. I'm sort of quite sad when it comes to all that stuff. I'm really geeky about it.
What are your thoughts of it?
There are lots of, just to jump in, I was going to say, there are lots of things we talk about on the show with regards to retro. Recently we've talked about vinyl and even compact cassettes coming back. This week we were talking about wired headphones. When I go out and about now, I'm surprised at the amount of people I see that are not using Bluetooth, and project turntables for vinyl. That this week they brought out a transparent one, which is just looking gorgeous.
God, beautiful.
And there's all sorts of lovely retro stuff going on, and I myself have gone back into vinyl in quite a big way. So do you think that that's going to continue to grow? It seems to be at the moment.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look up. Hang on. New cassette player. People can hear me typing real time. Here we go. It's called We Are Rewind. Have you seen this thing?
Oh yeah, we featured that on the show.
Did you? No, it's beautiful, and it obviously is styled very much after the first generation Walkman, isn't it? With that classic orange button. And do you guys know what the orange button was for on the original Walkman?
I don't think so. No,
it's a good one. This it was a talking button, so it actually had 2 3.5mm jack headphone slots, and so when you press the orange button on the first ever Walkman, you could talk to each other.
Oh right.
Isn't that cool? And this We Are Rewind, for your listeners, is a remake in metal of, I think it's metal, I might be wrong actually. I
think it's aluminium.
Is it? Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. Of the original Walkman. And the reason I mentioned the orange button is it's got the orange button on there, but I don't know what it's actually for. But my point is, it's a cassette player. It's a modern cassette player. And I love that, don't you? And they also offer a set of those orange foam headphones that with the aluminium headband. Do you remember that? Which is a very iconic part of that whole kind of wired for sound cassette player era. Love all that stuff. I'm a big fan of Project, the brand, and I think they've done a Bluetooth one, so that's good for me. As I sit, I'm looking to my left. I've got a box I've got my record box that I used to DJ with back in the day, and it's got my 12 inches. And my 12 inches have got little bits of paper in the hole in the center. And that's what I used. That was a trick so that they wouldn't wobble when you were scratching.
Ooh, okay.
These are all these lovely analog oddities, aren't they? So yeah, a big fan of that. And I think it's this same thing. We were talking about the human in the chain, right? Or the human in the machine. As we leap forward, we often then take a few steps back because we realize what we've lost, and we're willing, in retail terms, we're willing to pay for it, or we're willing, or we're looking for it as members of the tribe. And I think that's what it is, isn't it? The physical nature of vinyl, the crackle of it.
Or possibly that we're bored with what is now. So everything turning to AI, we don't have to think about doing anything, and we're bored with the pace of technology moving forward, except in AI, obviously. But we've done it. We've done everything now. So let's step back and do some of the stuff we used to do.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe why another subject that's close to my heart is maybe why VR and augmented and mixed reality haven't really hit hard. Because I would have expected, looking at the timeline, in fact, I probably at some of my events over the last 10 years predicted that by this time we'd be walking down the street with kind of high-res versions of what was Google Glass, or that Apple's Vision Pro would be a lot smaller and a lot more, maybe a lot cheaper and a lot more popular. And we're not there, are we? And I think that's partly because of the cultural dimension that we haven't actually accepted it. Like you say, we've got a little bit, the polish is gone a bit, hasn't it, on the constant need to evolve.
Yeah, certainly in mobile phone circles, the time we spent evolving with Android, for example, between 2008 and now, and 2007 and now, it was great fun. But now you can buy pretty much any phone on the shelf, and it will do 95% of what people need to do. So I think there is a plateau thing going on.
Yeah, there is. I think there is. It's a very good point. And then there was the other speed bump, which is the end of classical computing. So this notion that there won't be enough atoms between 0 and 1, off and on, for transistors to actually keep evolving at the exponential rate they have done since the invention of the computer. So that's going to be interesting, whether it's a speed bump or I don't think it'll be a full stop. It might be a cul-de-sac. We might have to reverse and find a new direction into the future. But yes, it does feel like that. And because we've seen such extraordinary change, haven't we? Like we were talking, you were talking earlier, Gareth, about the you were referencing AI and does it really have any uses? And I was thinking when you said that about the .com boom, about the kind of move to commerce, the idea that we were going to be shopping. Yeah, we were going to be shopping online. And if you remember, there were lots of attempts to get us shopping online that failed. And we also, and there will be, I am absolutely sure, lots of headlines in newspapers of the, whatever period it was, the early noughties, saying that this is not working. In fact, I remember there were headlines saying that the online shopping boom is over. It wasn't over. It's just that we hadn't found the killer application of that particular technology or the killer method to market, which I guess you would say is Amazon, really, the Amazon model, the Amazonization of shopping that's happened.
Yeah, and even then, there's others that come along behind it and don't quite manage it. How many times have we heard of other little, like AliExpresses and Wishes and all that sort of thing that could be nipping at the toes of Amazon, but never quite managed because it's too big to move.
Yeah, it's scary, that, isn't it? It's kind of encompassed. If you ever see his yacht, it's kind of encompassed in the image of this ridiculously massive sailing yacht that they had to, tear an ancient bridge down to get out of where the shipyard.
Oh yeah.
It's obscene, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we're running late on time, so what we'll do is we'll fire on with obviously you've got your Kickstarter coming up on the 30th of August for your movie campaign that you're putting out. Do you have a web address for that? Obviously, it's the Ctrl AI delete.com?
.net.
.net.
And thank you. That's very kind of you to mention that. Yeah.
I'll fire that in the show notes as well so that people can see that below. If you're listening on YouTube or whatever, it'll be in the show notes down below. And you've got the Gadget Show podcast, which is now available on most streaming services that you can get it from, like Spotify and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great, by the way. I have to just give a huge shout out to the amazing Suzi Perry, is just amazing. She's so funny and vivacious and full of joy. And we've done some really cool stuff, you know. We've had John Bentley on, who I believe hasn't John Bentley appeared on your podcast?
Ted's chums with John.
He came onto our PSC Plane Show Chat podcast, which I run with Steve Litchfield. But I do find that your podcast is the chemistry between you and Suzi works really well, and I was surprised at how digestible it was and how good it was to listen to. It should be very successful, I think.
I do hope so, Ted, because you know, as podcasters yourselves, it takes a lot more effort than people realize, doesn't it? To think of things every week. You can do a one-off, but doing a whole sort of weekly schedule of interesting ideas is tricky. What we're trying to do, guys, because of course our podcast also has a video, so we film the thing in a studio. It's like a kind of, what would it be, like a kind of warehouse with a brick wall kind of interior. It's very cool, wooden floor, brick walls, low beams. Just down the road in Digbeth in Birmingham, from the original studio, which was the Custard Factory where we used to do the Gadget Show. So that feels cool. And we've got the original producer and executive producer as well. And we try and do physical things at least once in every episode. So, for example, John will bring his famous briefcase and open it up, his leather briefcase, like the Chancellor's one, and he'll pull out, you know, a really cool lens for a new Canon. Or I remember we had the one of the DJI drones, I forget which one, but they said you can take this drone out of the box and fly it expertly with no training. And so we tried it, and it was, I'll tell you something, you've tried drones, I take it.
Yes.
They can get pretty random pretty quickly, can't they?
They can.
And this thing was incredible. So rather than having the kind of Futaba remote control, you know, thing that we're used to with the two sticks, this just has like a joystick that you hold in midair and just move it around, and just intuitively it just goes wherever you want it to go. And you're looking through. You're fully immersed in goggles, by the way. So you're seeing out of the drone. And I was flying it between the microphone, under the table, round the warehouse. It was absolutely nuts. And we've also been outside. Suzi tested those absolutely insane Dyson, you know, the Dyson headphones that have got like a face mask and air purifier built in. Yeah. So we try and do physical things as well. That's what's a little bit different about it. And we have a bunch of guests on as well. We've had a couple of YouTubers on who've got like insane, like, you know, audiences of 1 million people. And we're sort of talking to them about what their life is like. And, you know, one of them had interviewed, I think he'd interviewed Elon Musk. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, these young guys, you know, they're just doing crazy things with their social media and that. So there's a broad range of topics. But yeah, thank you. I'm really pleased, Ted, that you enjoyed it. We're enjoying making it.
Well done. Keep going.
It is lovely. It's a bit of a nostalgia as well, because you get to think about all those years ago whenever you tuned in every week to the Gadget Show to see it. And you know that you've had great hosts since then. I remember getting to meet Pollyanna Woodward a number of years ago. Yeah, she's a lovely lady. Yeah,
she's amazing. I think she lives in America now. She married a famous golfer, who some people might know, called Paul Casey, who often used to come on the Gadget Show shoots. He's a really cool guy, and she's got a family now, and it's great. And of course, Otis has been on the show. You'll know Otis. He was a very good friend of mine from way back in the day when I used to work on cable shows before the Gadget Show. We did a show together then. And 10 years later or so, whatever it was, he joined the Gadget Show. We've had there's a couple of guys that used to make all the gadgets for us. So we would do these builds. The jet-powered skateboard is a case in point, but we also built a robot version of me called RoboJace. And
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, can an AI, or as it was then, a chatbot, do the job of Jason? Let's get rid of Jason for a week. And
do you still have it?
I wish I did. It'd be great. But the boys at Grant and James from a company called Robo Challenge, who are ex Robot Wars competitors and now make kind of gadgets for companies. They used to help us make the more complicated stuff, and do some of the programming if it needed a bit of programming or whatever. And so they made Robo Jace, and they actually, in one of the episodes in the first series of the Gadget Show podcast, they brought Robo Jace with them under a shroud and then revealed him on air. We'll say on air while we're recording. And all I'll say is that the silicon of his face hadn't fared well in storage.
Oh, right. Okay.
It was like a horror movie. But yeah, so we do all kinds of cool stuff. It's not just, us talking about tech. We're also showing tech, and we're getting guests on too.
That's right. Yeah. Because you have the video side of things that goes out on YouTube and Twitch as well. Did you say?
So the Gadget Show podcast, to my knowledge, definitely Spotify, definitely YouTube, probably loads of other platforms. So yeah, just look it up. It'll definitely come up. It comes up in a quick search engine search.
Pretty fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time. It's been a great ride actually, and very informative as well. And I'm less scared of AI now as well, I think.
That's epic. That's epic. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I listened to your show, and I'm absolutely.
Oh, I apologize.
Chuffed to bits to be on it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Terrific. And Ted, you're less AI, or you're more AI friendly, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm still confused with it and not sure about it. But yeah, it's nice to talk it through. And certainly, Jason, you clearly have a lot of expertise in this area, doing all your talks and everything. So it's great to chat with you. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, guys.
Terrific. All right. Well, we'll bring it to a close there. And if you want to get in touch with us and talk about any of the issues that you've heard today, you can get us at contact@techaddicts.uk. I'm on Twitter as well, @Gareth Miles. And I've got my GarethMiles.com as well. That's MYLES. Ted, where can they find you?
They can find me at tedsalmon.com. Everything I do comes out from there, audio podcasts and all the MeWe groups where we have nice communities on the go. And if you get lost there, we're also at PodHub UK. You can just Google that and you'll find it.
Groovy. And Jason, do you have any socials you'd like to plug?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, just Jason Bradbury on X is probably the easiest. Just say hello, ask any of your questions, and that's probably the easiest way to get in touch.
Brilliant. Well, other than that, take care, and we'll speak to you all in a fortnight's time.
Bye.
Bye.